Last night, I felt saddened and I share my condolences. I pass them to all the members of families that were impacted by the plane crash yesterday. But, as I was going to sleep last night, that was heavy in my heart, especially when I started seeing the pictures. I saw the pictures of the team of kids that I can imagine they were in that plane rejoicing and celebrating their lives, skating, what they were doing with life. I saw pictures of families, an entire family gone. And it made me feel sad. And I have been in planes many, many times because I come from Kenya. And the only way to go to Kenya is by using a plane. Now, you can use a boat. It will take you 6 months, one trip, one way. I don't know if it's less now. That was the last I knew that it took 6 months to go from United States um, to Africa, to Kenya. So I have used flights to travel to Kenya many, many times and back. Wow. I mean, how shocking that all these very happy families left home believing that they were coming back home. But that did not happen for them. Instead, they all ended up dead unexpectedly, um, unplanned, unexpected, it, and it just happened. So I felt sad. And Fridays, um, I'm used to, or I'm planning on doing testimonies on Fridays because it's so easy to get caught up in all the things that are not going well, and we lose sight of the things that God is doing in our lives. So Fridays are my testimony day. But I'm doing this right now because I didn't do it yesterday. So I decided I'm gonna do this now. And this morning I struggled because I felt like, how do I give a testimony when that many people lost their lives? But as I prayed, I was reminded that death is always with us, and every day there is somebody dying. Each and every day, there's somebody dying. There are people dying to. My husband was reminding me even last night, there's always people dying. And it's heavier when a big group of people like this die at once and unnecessarily. Um, but we can't stop testifying because of the difficulties of life, because those things are going to happen. If we let problems dictate how we worship God, pretty soon nobody will be worshiping God. So we have to make up our minds to worship God no matter what we see happening around us in our lives. And so I had to get up and give a testimony this morning. But I want to do this to talk about making wishes known. As a chaplain of many years, first of all, let me share a story. When I first was going through my training to become a chaplain, I was only 30 years old. I say that because now I'm getting up there in age. I was 30 years old when I first became a chaplain. And in my training, in my first clinical pastoral education unit, in my first CPE unit, um, my supervisor had us do your preparation for your burial. He had us write how you want your burial to be. And I nearly left. I nearly left CPE because I felt like I'm only 30 years old. Why should I be thinking about my burial at the age of 30? And it was very difficult for all of us that were in the unit. We were about 6 students in the unit, 6 students. That's about how many students are in a unit of clinical pastoral education. And by the way, clinical pastoral education is the supervision that you go through to become a clinical chaplain. So they require clinical pastoral education. So after you get your master's degree, then you are trained to work in a clinical setting with people that are sick with various diseases. So you get supervision through CPE. So in that first unit, I had to write my funeral, and I cried through it. I was scared. Now, coming from a culture that did not talk about death, still does not talk about death, has a very difficult time dealing with death. And then coming and getting introduced to clinical pastoral education and having to actually sit and write your funeral. It was not a happy day, but you had to because that was required. So I wrote my funeral when I was 30 years old. Now, I'm sure, I don't know what I did with it. I would have to update it. I honestly um, don't remember what I did with it, but I would have to update it today. But you know what? Today, I would not be scared to write my funeral, amazingly. But at that time, it was very difficult. And I wrote my funeral, and then we had to write a will. And I wrote a will at the age of 30. What do you want? What would you want to happen if you died today? That's a question people struggle to go to. People don't want to think about death because we all think we have a lot of time here on earth. And even when time comes, for example, when people have a terminal disease, I've walked the journey with many, many, many patients with terminal diagnosis. And oftentimes, people always think they have time. Even when people have been told by the doctor, there's nothing else we can do, we're just going to wait for things to take their course. A lot of people are still in denial and hoping for a miracle. And as a result, many people don't take care of their business. And then when time comes for them to actually realize this is happening, it's too late to start making their wishes known. Maybe they can't speak as well, they have no energy. And then we see a lot of agitation, restlessness, um, because at that time people are thinking about all the things that they want to take care of. So after going through the CPE process and being forced to write my funeral, what I would like to see my funeral look like, I did that at the age of 30. I asked myself, in my circumstance, how would I want things to happen um, for myself, for my children? I have gone through divorce. I am remarried. What would that look like for me and for my children? And I had to think about that. And the more I thought about that, I realized there is a need for a will. There is a reason to write down what my wishes are because I have a circumstance that actually calls for wishes to be known if anything happened and I wasn't living. So I gathered courage and I actually wrote my first will. I was 31 years old when I actually wrote my first will. When I sat down and wrote my wishes and I said, this is what I would like to see happen A, B, C, D. And I called my sister and I talked with her. I said, I just want to let you know I have a living will. And I said, just in case anything happens, would you please raise my children? And my sister was so shocked. She said, what are you not telling me? What's going on? Are you okay? Is everything okay? She was panicking. She was so shocked. And I'm like, yes, everything is okay, sis. There is nothing wrong. I don't see anything that would tell me I'm dying in the near future. But I have a circumstance in my life that as I have gone through the process, it has forced me to actually sit down and think about my children and wonder what would happen if I died today at the age of 31. I said, what would happen if I died today? My children would be left suffering. Maybe they would be pulled to all directions, whatever. I thought of all these things and I wrote my first will. And I just want to encourage you to think about that because even as we think about this flight that crashed yesterday, those were all people that were living their lives, that were enjoying their life, that didn't see anything coming to take their lives. And it happened. For young children that had an entire life ahead of them, they were gone. Now, these are extreme situations, but they happen every day. Vehicle accidents happen every day, fires, whatever. But when people are diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's usually a very difficult time. There is so much shock when somebody is first told you have cancer, you have a heart condition, even when it's not terminal, actually, even when it's not terminal. But these are degenerating diseases that eventually, if they take their course, they end up becoming terminal illnesses. It's not necessarily that every person that has cancer becomes terminal. Some cancer is treated and it goes permanently, and some goes and then it comes back. Things like that happen. So these progressive diseases, sometimes when people have them, like if a heart start to get damaged, it doesn't get better. It doesn't um, regain everything that it lost, if that makes sense. The muscles get weak. They don't get stronger. They can be maintained as much as possible. So these are progressive diseases. And when anybody is told there's such a disease, people are very shocked. Now, some people take that opportunity to go and make their wishes known. They start writing a will. I know when my mom was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, she became very intentional about her wishes. She became very intentional about talking with my dad and saying, this is what we have. How are we going to leave this and this and this for the children? And they split up everything for their children. Before my mother took her last breath, she didn't have anything to her name. She had passed out everything that she had. Um, and she died a very peaceful death. I saw her take her last breath. It was peaceful. She was not struggling, she was not fighting. Anyhow, making your wishes known is really helpful. The thing is, it can be scary if you've never thought about it. It can be scary. And some cultures, like where I come from in Kenya, talking about death, people will hate you. People would think you're the angel of death. I went through that when I was going through it with my mom. I was hated. I was thought of as a horrible person for saying that my mom was dying. And I was treated very badly, even by family members. So I understand it's not an easy thing, and people don't want to be told that death is nearing. However, it's important to take time to think about it. I'm telling you, as somebody who has gone through the journey with people, walking beside people for many, many, many years. People who have thought about it ahead of time and prepared for it, they have a better rest of their life when they are told that death is nearing, way more than those who've never thought about it. Because it's better to prepare when you can, when you have the energy. Write out living will. Talk about what it is that you would like to see happen in the case that something um, in the case that something happened to you. Excuse me. Hello. Mugamono. Tigan kuringera. Bada ikainganona. Sorry about that. Um, so anyway, it's important to make your wishes known. You are leaving legacy. Write your living will, and talk if there are things that you wanna see things happen a certain way. Let's say you have a piece of land. Let's say you have bank accounts. Let's say you have other things that are titled to you. Write what you'd like to see those things done with if something happened to you and you are not here to make those decisions. Many times, people wait and they don't want to think about it because they think that when you think about death, it's going to happen. That is not true. I'm sitting here to tell you, number one, I have sat with people when they are taking their last breath for very many years, and many, many people that I watched take their last breath. And I did not die because I was in the same room, many times holding the hand of the person who is dying. That didn't make me die. I'm still here talking to you. I walked the journey with many people, talking with them about their death wishes, about their worries, their fears, talking about life after death. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? Are you ready? Do you know where you are going? That didn't kill me. I am still here. So I I tell you that, especially if you're from a culture that is afraid that death is a taboo. In Kenya, if you talk about death, people think you are weird. Again, when I was going through this with my mom, somebody actually told me that um, people think you're crazy. People think you're crazy. Why? Because I was talking about death and, you know, trying to figure things out for my mom in 2023, trying to make sure my mom's wishes were fulfilled. So I went to the funeral home, and they absolutely were shocked. And they were asking me, why are you here? Your mom is not dead. And they thought that I really wanted my mom to die because I went to the funeral home before my mom died. And as I was talking with my family members, and I was telling them, it's important to choose a funeral home before the person dies, because when your loved one dies, you are too emotional to be making difficult decisions. So it's important we discuss when mom passes, when family passes, what funeral home are we going to use? Where are they going to be buried? All those things. And at first, my family members were looking at me like, you lost your mind. But as I was explaining to them, we talked about these things ahead of time. The first time I went to the funeral home by myself, and the funeral person there thought I had lost my mind and said, how can she come to talk about this before her mom dies? Well, here is why. Because I have done that for about 18 years. About 18 years that I actively went to the funeral homes to talk with families about the funeral home, going to the funeral homes to talk um, the about the funeral services. I have personally officiated, or you can say presided over 120 funerals or more. So I have been around the funeral homes. It didn't make me die. Being around a dying person or somebody who's died or funeral home, it doesn't bring death to you. And you can imagine if there were no people in the funeral homes, who'd take care of your loved ones? So these are things that are needed. These are subjects that are very avoided. But think about it. Nobody will live on this earth forever and ever. Your great grandparents are not here today, but yet they lived and they walked the life we walk, and they probably didn't want to think about death, but the day came and they died. So we will all one day take our last breath. And that's it's good to come in terms with that. I never thought I was going to be a hospice chaplain. I never thought I was going to be a clinical chaplain working with people who are sick or people at the end of life. I never thought any of this would cross my path. Working with parents who've worked in the emergency room with a 20-year-old about those ages who have committed suicide, and they are begging the doctors to resuscitate them, and they're already dead. I never thought that would be me dealing with those type of realms, but the Lord put me in those paths. And when I went to those paths, it grew me up really quickly. It matured me up really quickly. And so I don't look at life the same way as a lot of people. And that's okay. That's okay. But I want to encourage you. Things happen all the time. And it's important to make your wishes known, because sometimes things can change very quickly. I met people who came to the emergency room and they were told, we don't see you here by the end of the week. Basically, the doctor is saying you have less than 7 days to live. Some people were told, I don't see you here tomorrow. And the person is talking, but they have cancer cells everywhere, in the brain, everywhere. and they didn't know. They were living their lives. They didn't know. They had no idea that that was happening. So it's important to take time to think about what wishes would you like to see fulfilled if things change drastically for you. Now, when it comes to end of life, where some people have an opportunity, it's not, in a sense, it's a sad time, and in another sense, it's an opportunity because not everybody has a chance to prepare for their death. So when people have been told there's nothing else the doctor can do, I've walked the journey with a lot of, because most of my chaplaincy has been in hospice. So I've walked the journey with many people once they have been diagnosed with terminal illness. And it's a lot of it is coming, talking and processing about what's important to them. Where is your faith? What would you like to see happen? Is processing those things. And so some people have been blessed to have that opportunity, even though many don't see that as a blessing, because we also have people that just feel this is really difficult to just sit thinking they are dying. It's hard to wait. And some people really struggle to wait to die, especially when they know that they are coming. Now, does telling somebody they are dying make them to die faster? I would absolutely disagree. It doesn't. Actually, there are people who get past the first shock, the initial shock, the initial news is always shocking for people. Even people who think, wow, my body doesn't feel right. And they really think something is wrong. When they are actually told, yes, something is wrong, there's a terminal disease, they are in a lot of shock at that moment. But many people get past that and they are able to reason and to start thinking, okay, now what next? What do I need to take care of? And some people actually become very positive, and they'll say things like this: I was given bonus time. One person that I walked the journey with actually for 3 years after the day he was diagnosed with a condition. There are many that I went through for 3 years, but it's not the norm, 3 years. The expectation is actually 6 months. So most people would die within 6 months, and some a year. But somebody told me the day I died was the day that I was diagnosed. After that, every day is a bonus and I live it fully. So some people get to the other side and they just start enjoying their life every day. They do things that they never, or that they put on hold for many years, and they just enjoy life. So finding out that somebody is dying doesn't cure them. God created human beings with so much resilience. So for cultures that think telling somebody the truth is gonna cure them, that is not true. God created humans with something called resilience to overcome all kinds of shock and actually live. So, terminal diagnosis doesn't mean somebody has quit living or died. People can still get proper help, proper spiritual care, and continue to live the remaining of their life and live a very fulfilled life. I have seen it happen for years. Again, today I want them to focus on making wishes known. You don't have to wait until you have a terminal disease, because none of us know the day, the hour, how. We don't know. If we knew, we would all be ready. Other people wait and they think they have time. And then they leave their children fighting. They leave their children fighting over land. They leave their children fighting over this property or that property. They leave their children fighting over that chair or that spoon that was left by great grandma. They leave their children fighting over things. So it's important to say when you are alive, who wants this? How will this be taken care of? Then, because even with making wishes known, some children are going to be upset. Some people are going to feel that they are not getting everything they wanted. But at least when you are alive as a parent, you can work through those issues and at least leave your family with peace, with a sense of peace. They might not all be happy about your decisions, but at least they won't be left taking each other's throat about things. So it really helps to make your wishes known. I would encourage you to do that. I have done that. Um, I was 31 when I wrote my first will. I have made amends, and over time, I make it a habit to make my wishes known. Even my children, from a young age, I talk to them and I've told them, in case of this, just know ABCD. In case of that, just know ABCD. I've trained them that way, and I'm so grateful because my mother was a social worker and she was just very good with how she did things. She wasn't the one to shy away from, I don't want to talk about this. I had a lot of conversations with my mom, and I'm going to tell you, not all my family members had those conversations because they didn't want to listen. It's not that my mom was not talking, but they didn't want to listen. So my goal is to educate the community on these things because I've seen some of my family members regret afterwards. And my goal is to educate as many people as possible to avoid those regrets. Because as a family, if you listen to your loved one, that when they say, I'm dying, listen to them. Don't tell them, stop saying that. That's not going to happen. Just listen and even ask questions. If indeed you'd end up dead, what should we do about this? What should you do about that? What do you want with this? What do you want with that? Ask questions because when they tell all their wishes, their death end up being very peaceful because they are not dying with things hanging over their neck. They are feeling like it's going to be taken care of. My mom was very worried about my dad. And I promised her in the summer of 2023, I promised her, Dad is not going to suffer. And she asked me, can you take care of your father? My family agreed with it because they know that I have a lot of experience from the medical field standpoint. I've worked with the elderly for a lot of years, and I have that experience and knowledge. And when my mom told me this, my family didn't argue with it. So these are all things that were decided. And when I saw my mom take her last breath, I knew there was nothing hanging over her neck. All of her wishes were taken care of. So I want to encourage you. Think about it. Putting it off doesn't keep it from happening. At the same time, dealing with it doesn't make it happen sooner. May God bless you.